Welcome back to Malthus Magic. Today, I have the honor and privilege of bringing on the show Brother Mike Briganti. What's going on, brother?
Good morning, brother. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
No problem. Thanks for coming on the show. So, today I wanted to have a conversation about high magic, ceremonial magic, and Freemasonry, right? So how it connects or maybe doesn't connect. So I figured, you would be a great brother to bring on and explore this topic.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you. No problem. Thanks for coming on. If you could do the viewers a favor and just give like a brief introduction of yourself, that would be great. And the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first and foremost, my name is Mike Briganti, and I've been a Freemason now for 22 years. I haven't been active that whole time, though. I joined initially in 2003. I was active for my first year, and then I was inactive for the next 9 years. Between you and I, and the viewers, obviously, it was at a time in my life when I don't feel I was fully ready for it. I used to struggle with drugs and alcohol. It was during this time period, and I guess maybe I placed some unrealistic expectations on Freemasonry, thinking that it was going to help me get my life together. Long story short, it didn't initially, so for the next 9 years I was inactive, but I always knew in my heart that I would always want to get back into Freemasonry when and if I ever got my life together. So luckily I kept up with my dues for the 9 years. 2012, I finally got the help that I needed, got my life back together, and almost immediately I got back involved with Freemasonry. And I've been active for the last maybe 12 years. I'm going to say each year I get a little bit more involved, maybe advance a little further, take another position, learn another piece of ritual, do a little bit more service. Each year it's like the layers continue to peel back. I understand it deeper and more each year. I belong to Lynbrook Massapequa Lodge, number 822 in the Nassau Masonic District. I'm a Scottish Rite Mason. I'm a member of the Valley of Rockville Center. I'm a York Rite Mason, Royal Arch, Cryptic Council, Knights Templar. I belong to the Grotto. So that's basically my Masonic resume. I've served as a worshipful master. I'm currently serving as the excellent high priest of my Royal Arch chapter, and I've had countless other commitments. I'm not going to get into all of them, too. So that's basically my Masonic resume.
Thank you, brother, for that introduction. So I haven't been in Masonry as long as you. So my path, I joined a lot of other esoteric bodies and groups, some that do meet at Masonic lodges, most of them prior to Masonry. And then Masonry was like the last thing I joined, and to me it completed the circle of my path. So I enjoy it, and I'm in the Scottish Rite as well. I really enjoy the Scottish Rite. Also Royal Arch Mason, Commandery, Cryptic Council. Every part of Masonry I feel like is packed with deep symbolism and great lessons to build your character and help you on this spiritual path.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I had some questions I wanted to kind of use as like a guideline for this podcast. So I'm just going to dive into them, and just answer whatever you can or feel comfortable answering. Sure. So there's no wrong answer, right? It's really just kind of getting to know your opinion on Masonry and high magic and those items. So let me read off the list here. So what initially drew you to both Freemasonry and the study of high magic?
All right. I'd like to answer these separately if possible. So I initially touched on what drew me to Freemasonry. So like I said, it was at an awkward time in my life. I had set some unrealistic expectations on Freemasonry, but I was also always very drawn to not just Freemasonry, but Freemasons themselves. Like my grandfather was a Freemason for 67 years. I had a couple of friends that I was very close with, guys that I looked up to. I was always drawn to men of character, men of substance, hardworking men, family men, pillars in their community, men of faith. And I knew all the Masons I knew fit had those qualities. So that always attracted me to Freemasonry. I'm also a history buff, and anyone that's into history can see Freemasonry's hand all throughout history. And I was always into, symbolism, mythologies, folklore, and I feel that's all kind of tied into Freemasonry. So there was always that spark in me that drew me towards Freemasonry. But like I mentioned earlier, I got involved in a time of my life when maybe I wasn't completely ready. But then, like I said, in 2012, I turned my life around, my spiritual journey began, and from then until now, my life has just improved in countless ways. I continue to grow as a man and as a Mason. So the reasons why I joined as compared to the reasons why I stay are two different. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And as far as the Magick, that's a different story. So I began getting involved with high magic a little over 4 years ago. Now, if you would have told me maybe 7 or 8 years ago I'd be involved with magic, I would have said, no way, that's devil worship. I would never do such thing. I was very religious for a time of my life, and I think that's the belief amongst a lot of religious people. So the fact that I'm actually doing magic is like a miracle unto itself. So, like I said, I've been practicing magic now a little over 4 years. The first year was kind of on and off, in and out. I think that's the case with a lot of people first getting involved. One of the important things of magic is committing to a daily practice. And for that first year, I wasn't fully committing, but I was learning, getting my feet wet, I'm going to say by the second year is when I really committed to a daily practice, learning new rituals, doing a deep dive, learning more, reading more. And I'm going to say within that year is when I really began to start to get it, to start to grow. But after about 2 years, I was accepted into a school for high magic. You and I have spoken about this. And so I'm going to say at that point is when I really began my official training. So what I had learned up until that point, I was kind of on my own, figuring out, learning as I go. Whereas now I'm in a school with a teacher that's well-versed in these types of things. And we kind of went back to the beginning and started over scratch, but we really did a deep dive into it. I like to compare it to maybe exercising in the gym. You go to the gym, I try this, I try that. You might get some results, but you're not getting, the maximum amount of results. And then one day you take on a personal trainer and you kind of go back to the beginning, and now you're learning the proper exercises, the proper formations, the proper diet, everything that goes along with fitness. And that's when you really start seeing the results. And that's been my story, up until now.
Nice. What is you mentioned about I guess year 2 is when you kind of really dove into it, got more serious, and then you found a school and a teacher. What is for the viewers? What is your day-to-day practice look like? Stuff that you feel comfortable sharing? Is it a very is it monastic? Is that something you do from waking up till night, or is it you do stuff every other day? Could you explain more about what your spiritual practice is?
Sure. So the tradition we follow was originated by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's also known as the Western esoteric tradition. A lot of basic rituals. I'm sure your viewers are familiar with them. The LBRP, the Middle Pillar, the Rose Cross ritual, the hexagram ritual. So I practice every morning when I wake up. I wake up 1 hour before work, and that first hour every day, I do my meditations, my rituals, any breathing exercises I need to do. I think it's important not only committing to a daily practice, but also setting aside a certain time every day to commit to that practice. So I do a series of rituals. I do a series of meditations in the morning. I might do some breathing exercises. So the way that it's set up, when the school began about a little over 2 years ago, we started out doing some preliminary work, just understanding what exactly is magic. Magic is essentially a spiritual path. And so we were learning about the spiritual path with a very specific objective, And we also learned about the different paths, you understand?
Okay.
In addition to that, we broke down the symbolism of some of the basic rituals, because by that time we knew the rituals, but did we really understand the significance of what we were doing? So we kind of did a deep dive into that. We went through a self-initiation period. We've consecrated and anointed ourselves and our implements and everything.
Nice.
And then after about 6 months, we got started with the elemental work. So we began working with the 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire.
Wow.
We spent 3 months on each element. So we devoted 1 year of doing elemental work.
Wow.
And I'm sure your viewers know, earth corresponds to our physical being, air to our mental being, water to our emotional being, and fire to our vital being, our will, our drive. And so for each of those 3 months, we would only focus on that element and how it applies to us in our life. So essentially what you're doing, you're kind of separating these 4 aspects of yourself, purifying them, and then kind of bring them back together. If you're familiar with the concept of salve et coagula,
Yes.
dissolve and coagulate, yes, that's essentially what we're doing.
Okay.
So after about 1 year of doing the elemental work, we then moved on to the planetary work, where we devoted 1 month to each of the 7 planetary bodies in astrology.
Wow.
Now, 1 month is not a lot of time to spend on each planet,
Yeah.
especially since we just spent 3 on each element.
Okay.
But in that 1 month, it's a good opportunity to familiarize yourself with that planetary energy, how to work with it, how it manifests in your day-to-day life, how to identify it. Also, something different started at this point. Up until this point, they were laying out the curriculum, the rituals, the practices, the exercises for us. At this point, they basically told us, look, this time for the training wheels to come off. You guys are at a point now where you should be able to create your own rituals, come up with your own curriculum, find your own practices.
Wow.
And so it was kind of like, like when you're teaching the kid to ride the bike, eventually you got to let go at some point.
Yep.
So it was left to us to figure it out for ourselves. So we actually just wrapped up the 7th planetary body, which is Saturn.
Wow.
And now we're about to get started with the zodiacal work. So
Wow.
I'm curious to see how that's going to go.
Yeah, that sounds intense. I'm also in some the order as well, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I guess it's more of like a traditional one. So we take a little longer within the grades. We have like specific times, and then it's really more of like an hour pace. So I think right now I'm working in water, and I'm in Hode right now in water, which is great. It was great. I was stuck in earth for a while, as I told you in the past. But it's interesting. You touched on that, the 4 elements. There's a show on Prime. It's called Brigante. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yes.
So in that show, it takes place when the Romans were in Britannia. That's what they called Great Britain or England, and the Druids were still heavy, and the priests kind of ran the communities out there. And there's a scene when the girl. She's supposed to be like the chosen one. She has to go through the ordeals of the 4 elements, they call it. So
trial by the elements.
Trial by the elements. When I saw that, I was like, wow, it all connects. It all connects to the Druids, the Greek mysteries, and the Egyptian mysteries. I feel like are all within the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and other ceremonial schools. So I thought that was really interesting how you touched on that and how we're seeing it in modern day shows that depict the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, great. So, now, do you see any connections between high magic and Freemasonry?
Yes, I do. I want to be careful when I touch on this subject for a number of reasons. Obviously, you and I were both Freemasons. We're bound by obligation. Certain things we can't discuss. But also, there's another reason. A lot of people in Freemasonry don't like to associate magic with Freemasonry for different reasons. A lot of it has to do with the way the public sees us and all these conspiracy theories. A lot of people believe we're devil worshippers and we're sacrificing goats, and God only knows what else they think. So when they hear things like this, that's where their mind goes to. Obviously, if you strip down the Masonic rituals, obviously there's elements of magic worked into it, but it's no different than a lot of religious services.
Okay.
I was raised Catholic. Nothing against the Catholic Church. But if you go to a Catholic mass, you're going to see a lot of the same practices.
Yeah.
A lot of them they're fluffed up with dogma and pageantry, and if you strip down a lot of these rituals, at their core, it's a lot of the same basic practices. For example, before a ceremony, you would do an opening. You understand?
Okay.
Yeah. At the end, you would do a closing.
Yes.
You know?
Okay. Yep.
So in between would be the ritual itself. Let's say, for example, it's an invocation.
Yep.
So You'll see those in all, in different ceremonies.
Yeah.
You might also see a purification of the temple, a consecration of the temple. You might see a lot of the same implements, an altar with representations of the four elements.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah.
understand?
Yep.
Robes, circumambulation of the temple. So you'll see a lot of these things in these different religious, Masonic, magical ceremonies. So if you, like I said earlier, if you would have stripped down these things to their bare bones, there would be a lot of similarities.
Wow.
So that's my take on it. As one of my teachers would say, is that religion is merely just magic that's been sanctioned by an authority. So
I like that. Yeah. Also, I'll have a disclaimer just so the viewers know. Anything that we say that has no connection to any Grand Lodge, Grand Body, Grand Chapter, Grand Commandery, anything that connects with Masonry or even any esoteric group, this is solely the opinions of ourselves. So just so everyone knows, okay?
yes, great disclaimer.
Yeah, not a problem. Yes, so let me get to a couple more questions here. So next area is like the foundations of high magic. So for those that are unfamiliar, how would you define high magic, and how does it differ from other esoteric practices?
Okay, I mean, the foundations of high magic, from what I understand, goes back to the ancient world, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, the Kabbalah. So I believe they've all played a role. How high magic differs from other types, I'm going to say high magic is more focused on seeking to know divinity, like spiritual work, or what they might call theurgy.
Okay, yeah.
So theurgy is essentially a combination of two words. It starts out with the Greek word for God, which is theos.
Okay.
And then ergy, which is work. Like metallurgy would be metal work. So I like to think of theurgy as like God work, seeking to know, to understand divinity, spiritual development, enlightenment. Whereas I feel like low magic has more to do with the material plane, manifesting things within the material plane. You might also work with, low magic's also referred to as natural magic. You might be working with the energies of natural objects, like, say, crystals, herbs, gemstones. That's my understanding of it. I don't know too much on low magic. You might want to, have maybe someone else go a little deeper into it, but that's my understanding. My experience has been primarily with high magic. But like I said, it's connected with the Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Hermeticism. I believe they're all intertwined.
So now also, thank you for that great answer. So many people also associate high magic with ceremonial rites and Hermetic traditions, which you basically touched on. What are some key principles or texts that serve as its foundation? Like, meaning key texts that for you. So like, I like, the Sefer Yetzirah is one I use. I use some of Dion Fortune's books. Obviously I use a lot of the Golden Dawn curriculum books. But then there's also, Hermetic books as well. So what are kind of key books that you use, or key texts that along with your practice?
Well, as far as Hermeticism, I think ultimately the Corpus Hermeticum would be the top one. I really enjoyed the Hermetica, was another good one. The Kabbalion, the Emerald Tablets. Yeah, so there's a lot of great literature on Hermeticism. And a number of the books you mentioned also, too. I read Dion Fortune, Mystical Kabbalah.
Oh, yeah, that one was deep.
Yeah, obviously, the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. I'll be honest with you, I'm more into the more modern readers. And to each his own, there's no right or wrong. But I feel that I could relate more to the more modern writers, and they're a little bit easier for me to understand and apply it to my practices in my daily life. If I could recommend one book for anyone who's just looking to get started, it would be Learning Ritual Magic by John Michael Greer. So essentially, the way the book is laid out, it's a course in magic, and they go over all of the basics. They touch on the Kabbalah, they touch on the tarot, it talks about the history of magic a little, the different planes of being, the importance of journaling, the importance of a daily practice. It breaks down some of the basic rituals like the LBRP, the middle pillar. And it's essentially a course where if you follow it the way that John Michael Greer lays it out, the course should take you approximately 9 months.
Oh, wow.
Now, I didn't discover this book until I had already been practicing for 2 years, and I was just getting started with my training. But once I discovered it, I wish I would have discovered it 2 years earlier.
Wow.
I could have spared myself 2 years of trial and error, but it's all part of the process.
Yeah.
So if there's one book I could recommend, it would be that book, Learning Ritual Magic by John Michael Greer. A couple other books that really helped me out. High Magic by Damien Eccles. I'm not just saying that because he's my teacher. Damien also has a way of simplifying these things, breaking it down so that anyone can understand and practice it. And another good one is Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig. That was another one of my favorites. If I could recommend 3 books to anyone that's new or looking to get started or learn more, I would definitely recommend those 3.
Nice, yeah. I like Lon Milo DeQuette's books too. So I'm really big into. I like Thelema philosophy and practices as well. A lot of it connects to Golden Dawn magic. He explains it pretty well too as well. Like it's a lot easier to understand than like A.E. Waite's books.
Yeah,
I have all those too, right? But also, and I like Crowley's book Libra 4, Book 4. It's a thick book, but the way he explains it is really great. I like how he connects, the Eastern and Western together. Because I think sometimes some groups might lack that. They might be just too Western. But I think it's good, we all live on this earth, right? To combine sometimes some Eastern philosophy and
we can all
Western
learn from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Lon also. I read The Chicken Kabbalah. It's one of my favorites. I
Oh,
follow him
I've
on
never read
YouTube.
that yet. That was good.
Yeah. I follow him on YouTube. But I agree with you with A.E. Waite. Sometimes he's writes in that Victorian England style of writing. Sometimes it can be a little hard to kind of like digest, but he's very knowledgeable,
Yeah, his stuff. It's like I always want to read his stuff, but then it's like sometimes it's so like dense. It's almost like Pike stuff. So it's like almost the same time.
Same
span,
era,
right? Same era.
Mackie,
where
Pike.
they had to. It took them 2 pages just to get like one subject, one point across, when it could have been like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, cool. So, next questions, I want to kind of dive into more about connecting it more with Freemasonry. So, do you see Masonic rituals as a form of high magic, or do you think they serve a different purpose?
I'm going to say both. I see that the connection with magic, but it's also more than that. There's also the exoteric aspect of Freemasonry too, which is brotherhood, which is charity, family. So there is that esoteric aspect of Freemasonry, which brothers like you and I are drawn to, and a lot of other Masons. But then there's also the exoteric aspect, which we can't ignore. A lot of brothers are drawn to that aspect of it, the fraternalism, the service. One thing I love about Freemasonry, it gives you opportunities to practice these things. It doesn't just tell you, go out there in the world, do charity. It presents you with opportunities to do charity.
Yeah.
It doesn't just talk about the importance of fellowship and fraternalism and brotherly love. It gives you opportunities to practice these things. So, like I said, there's the esoteric and the exoteric aspects of Freemasonry, and I love them both, honestly.
Yeah, no, me too. I think it's all about having the balance, really.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people think, oh, he's an esoteric Mason, so I'm like, well, no, I love fellowship. Like that's a big part. I love going out to the district dinners and and the reunions here and the awards night. I think it's all part of it, and I think the true test of a Mason or a occultist or ceremonial magician is the ability to be able to live in the world and like to be able to function and not always be a hermit, right? To be able to function at a fellowship club or a festive board, and not think that it's beneath you, right? It's all part of it. And I feel like it's all magic, and it's all part of this beautiful thing we call life.
Absolutely. And a lot of the growth we experience as a result of our spiritual practices, we're now meant to integrate that into our day-to-day life. And Freemasonry presents us with those opportunities.
Oh, yeah. 100%. So next question I have here is, are there specific Masonic degrees or teachings that align or reflect with magical principles?
Yeah, again, I want to be careful answering this because I have to respect my Masonic obligation. I think I touched on this earlier, that there are a lot of similarities between Freemasonry and magic and maybe other religious ceremonies. I think I said pretty much all I have to say on this in the last question.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so it's very interesting. So for me, joining Masonry last, I tend to see a lot of the things. I see a lot of like the veiled symbolism, in Masonry from the esoteric schools or books that I've like read in the past, and I think that's what excites me the most. So like different things as far as there's like different numbers are prevalent in Masonry.
Yes.
Different things that you said that we
The
mentioned
number
before.
3.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That I
Yeah.
mentioned. Different items that you might see, like in a religious ceremony too, as well. So I think there's like an underlying foundation between a lot of different various groups, whether it's religious, whether it's fraternal, Masonic. You see some key things that are like opening, closing, different parts. So I definitely appreciate that.
Okay, it's funny how different our journeys have been. Like you were involved with some other things, and then you got involved with Freemasonry, which you said completed your circle. For me, it was the opposite. I started with Freemasonry, and from there, it kind of ventured out into other things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We all have. It's funny too, because like we all have our paths, and everything was meant to happen. I believe in synchronicities. So our paths may have been opposite, but now they've just merged together.
Absolutely.
At this point in time, when we both went through a different way of seeking, but ended up still in a similar point of understanding and recognition as far as with the type of consistent practices that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And these spiritual journeys, I like to think they have a consciousness of themselves. They kind of guide us on our journey. They guide us where and when and to who we need to aid us in our spiritual development.
Oh yeah, definitely, 100%. So we're getting a little close to the time here. So I wanted to kind of, for any Masons that are seeking more light in Masonry, let's say that they might not necessarily be seeking high magic, right? It's not for everybody. It's definitely a disciplined path too, as well. Are there anything you could recommend? Any like basic books or practices that they could do within their Masonic journey to help them to gain more light, and to maybe get a more spiritual component added to it?
Ultimately, I believe it's up to each brother to discover his own path, because we're clearly all drawn to different paths. We're all here for different reasons. We're all looking for different things. My advice would be, travel, meet people, ask questions, see what you're into, see what resonates with you. For one guy, it might be high magic. For someone else, it might be the Kabbalah, alchemy, the tarot, astrology. As many Masons as there are, there's that many different spiritual paths. And ultimately, I think it's up to each individual to figure that out for himself. But it's not going to just happen by itself. You have to make the effort, take the first step.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. No one's gonna. People think they join and then it's just gonna hand them all the secrets of. It's not like that. It's all about many are called, but few are chosen. They say, right?
Absolutely. And you know what they say: when you seek the light will seek you. So I'm a firm believer in that. That initially it's up to us. I believe the degree to which we seek it will determine the degree to which we receive it. So it's up to each individual to take that first step, make that first initial effort. I feel like you're essentially putting a vibration out into the world saying, okay, I'm ready, I want to learn. You know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And just pay attention, see what comes back at you, see what resonates you, what interests you, and just take it from there and see what direction it leads you in. If you would have told me, like I said earlier, if you would have told me a couple of years ago I'd be into this, I would have said, no way, that's not me. I'd never thought in a million years I'd be sitting here on a podcast talking about high magic, And even since I've got involved with magic, my journey has actually splintered off into other directions. Some things I'm not really able to talk about. Other things, like, say, alchemy, for example. Like most people, I always thought that alchemy was just medieval mystics trying to turn lead into gold.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea it was a spiritual practice unto itself. And so about a year and a half ago, I began dabbling with alchemy. Again, just like when I began dabbling with magic, I'm kind of was trying to figure it out on my own, reading, talking to people. It looks like very shortly I might be starting a 3-year class in alchemy.
Really?
So just like magic, where I kind of went back to the beginning and started out from scratch, but started receiving the proper training, I foresee that this hopefully this will be my path with alchemy also, that now that I'll be in a school with a knowledgeable teacher, he'll take us back to the beginning, start over from scratch, and so now I could really, get the most out of it and learn the most from it.
It's interesting because alchemy is a big part of like a Rosicrucian philosophy. And if you ever get a chance, I got a chance to go to the headquarters for a Rosicrucian organization in San Jose, California. Pretty big grounds there. And there is an Egyptian museum. It's one of the biggest Egyptian museums on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And they have an exhibit, a floor dedicated to what? Alchemy.
Oh, wow.
A whole floor. And each part of the exhibit is like, I guess, the 7 stages of alchemy. Mm-hmm. And you go through it, you look at the implements that they had, and you read what happened, and you meditate at an image, and it just transforms you. And you go all the way around, and there's the famous alchemical pictures of the man with legs, and then like the planets around him.
Oh,
so you
yeah.
start to meditate on all these items, and it's a whole. I think I was there 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And they have an actual in the center exhibit of what an alchemist lab looked like back then. Mm. So yeah, if
Puffers,
you have everything, all the different the Athenors, yeah, right. And so I thought that was interesting. If you're ever interested in, there's a lot out there, and alchemy it is about turning lead into gold, but it's a spiritual thing.
Absolutely. It's just as much a spiritual practice as it is a physical practice. And it's amazing how those ancient alchemists work without all of the modern technology that we had nowadays with hot plates and thermometers. You could order anything you need off Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not for the information that's available to us nowadays. They didn't have that back then. Now you go on the internet. You got the modern-day Library of Alexandria right there in your internet search engine or whatever you call it,
Yeah, I think we definitely have it a lot easier today. So, but the problem is that we have so much information at our fingertips. I think we tend to maybe procrastinate more because we think, I could always read that book. Or back then, if they found it, they would go years trying to find an ancient manuscript, right? It would take them, months to travel to different places where we could just get on a flight. 6 hours. I'm at a alchemical museum.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely sometimes take that for granted, and I think we live in one of the best times right now for any of these items that people are interested in. Everything's there. You just have to have the will, the dedication, and discipline to embark on this path.
Oh, absolutely. Just being able to talk about this a few centuries ago, we might have been burned at the stake for talking about these things.
Oh, yeah.
And something else you mentioned that I'd like to touch on. Yes, we do have a lot of information available to us nowadays, which is great, but the downside of that is a lot of disinformation out there too. And so part of this process is kind of sifting through, separating what's true from not, But again, like I said, a spiritual journey has a consciousness of its own. Yeah. So if you're really committed to this, you'll in time you'll figure out what's true and what isn't.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we could actually cut it to some. If you have any final remarks, the floor is yours.
Maybe I'll just touch on how Freemasonry and Magick have impacted my life. So when I first began practicing Magick, like I said, a few years earlier, I would have never thought I'd be involved with that. But I also believe now that all of my spiritual practices leading up to that point have kind of guided me to and prepared me for that. So I mentioned I used to struggle with drugs and alcohol. My spiritual journey actually began with a 12-step fellowship. Okay. And that's what kind of got me on the path. And then from there, it kind of splintered out in other directions. I got back involved with church. I was very religious, Bible study, volunteering. I got back involved with therapy, doing, Freudian analytical psychology, whatever, analysis.
Like psychotherapy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Psychotherapy, deep unconscious work, dream interpretation. I got back involved with Freemasonry. So right off the bat, my journey began to splinter in different directions. I never thought that all of them would kind of like converge into one and lead me back to this path I'm on now. Like I said, when I first started dabbling with Magick, I had no idea the extent how it would impact every area of my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I also didn't realize how much emphasis there is on the inner work too, because a lot of people think of magic, they think of manifesting things in their life. I'm going to manifest Mr. or Mrs. Right. I'm going to manifest $1,000,000. Most of it has to do with the inner work, the inner transformation. I mean, physically, I haven't been sick physically since I've started practicing magic. I used to get little aches and pains in my body. I don't experience those anymore.
Wow.
I used to take short, shallow, stunted breaths. I don't do that anymore. I could see how mentally how I've gotten a lot sharper. I'm able to retain information better. I'm able to speak and communicate more clearly. I don't get forgetful like I used to. I'm able to think backwards as well as forwards. Like a lot of people, you ask them where they're going to be next Friday night, they can tell you, but ask them what they had for breakfast this morning, and they're clueless.
Yeah.
Emotionally, I'm more balanced emotionally, spiritually, I feel more connected to God than ever. So like I said, when I first started out, I had no idea the depths of it.
Wow.
And also as far as Freemasonry, I know I touched on this earlier, how like it gives you opportunities to apply the principles that we learn. I mean, I'm involved with charity, I'm involved with education, and helping other people helps me just as much. And the more effort that I put into it, the more I get out of it. This is the work of a Master Mason. And the spiritual results that we experience and the growth, these are the wages of a Master Mason. So
excellent. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
So just want to thank you for coming on this podcast episode. I would definitely love to have you back on again in the future. And that's it.
Okay, thank you for having me.